Hello, I'm Rob Birdsell. Welcome to the next class. And I am joined by my new co host, Nico Anderson. Nico, how are you?
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to this season with you. And welcome to our second guest on the fourth season of the next class, Lincoln Snyder. Lincoln, welcome to the next class.
Hey, great to be here. Good to see you, Rob. Good to meet you, Nico.
Nice to meet you, Lincoln.
So, Lincoln, first, I already did this, but I'm going to do it again. Is that a real background or is that a fake background?
It is a real background. So this is, living in the age of Zoom, we decided to take all of our pretty books and put them on one bookshelf for on-camera interviews just like this one.
I'm impressed because I was going to say, how do you do a fake background on Squadcast? I haven't figured that out yet. Anyway, so you're coming to us, Lincoln, from Virginia, if I recall?
Yeah, from Arlington, Virginia. So moved to Arlington about a year ago because we reopened an in-person office for the NCEA. So we're back on Glebe Road, operating out of the Arlington Chancery here in Arlington, Virginia.
That's great. That's great. A big move from Sacramento, though. How's the
It
family
is,
doing?
well, it just turned out that Sacramento to DC was a lousy commute. So my wife and three sons and I decided we'd take the plunge and have moved to the DC area.
My wife went this summer. We went, and it was her first trip to DC, and absolutely loved it. Such a great city that you get to work in. Although Nico and I are both here in Chicago, and it's a lovely day here. And feel fall coming in Chicago.
Absolutely. Big fan of Chicago. It's a big, diverse country, and one of the fun things of the job is just really have gotten a sense of just how many neat spots there are. I've taken 3 cross-country trips over the last year, or year and a half, as we were in the process of moving, and got to visit Catholic schools from Lubbock, Texas, to New Orleans and East Coast and West Coast and all over. So it's been a nice education getting to see the U.S. from that perspective.
Did you drive cross country 3 times?
Drove cross country 3 times.
Wow, that's amazing. I biked it once. I don't
Oh,
know
wow.
that I've ever driven it. That's impressive. 3 times. But good use of your job. I mean, you're out there seeing the people.
Absolutely.
What was your
Alrighty, well, let's jump into it here. We've got a couple subjects that Nico and I would love to hear your thoughts on. The first, and I know you've told me the story over the years, but you're not a traditional educator by training. You didn't start as a teacher and become a principal. You had another career to begin with. So what was your first career, and how did you then get into education?
That's a great question. Yeah, I have been blessed with 2 careers that have overlapped at times, but and I did spend 4 years in total as a classroom teacher. But I had a career in business. So for 13 years, I was in sales and marketing. For 6 years, I was living in Krakow, Poland, working for a big American-owned but Polish-based manufacturer called Canpack, and it was a wonderful experience. You got to spend time in Dubai and the UK and Brazil, and so it was a wonderful way to spend my 20s. But as I became a family man, so we have I said 3 teenage sons. I decided that life was a little bit too fast paced, so relocated to Sacramento, ostensibly to work in a family business, which I did for 7 years. But my path there took me into Catholic schools just by a chance encounter in the office of my high school I graduated from, Christian Brothers High School, Sacramento, California.
Uh, and how old were you when you then got into education?
That's a great question. So I moved back and forth a little bit. The first time I was 25. I had finished a 3-year contract in Poland and moved back to Sacramento, and walked into the office of my old high school, and the summer school principal, who had been my English teacher, told me, "You know what? Our rhetoric teacher just quit. Glad you're here. If you can steal your mom's curriculum." My mother had been the rhetoric teacher at the same high school. I'll
Oh,
hire you
really?
on the spot.
Wait, she was a teacher at Christian Brothers.
She was. She
Wow.
was. Yeah,
Didn't
she.
know that.
Yeah, so she had been. She had taught honors American Lit and composition and a bunch of stuff. And so they. I mean, it's interesting. I know a lot of people have different charismatic experiences with the Lord, and when they talk about their vocation stories, for me, I sincerely believe the Spirit always talked to me through specific people, and in this case, it was Mr. Jablonski telling me, the rhetoric teacher just quit. Would you like the job? And which evolved into, well, the economics teacher quit. Would you like the job? And so, what started off as a chance encounter turned into a teaching gig, which lasted a couple of years. I thought at the time I wasn't going to do it forever, so I went from that back to Poland and back into business. But the education and the Catholic education bug had bit, and so even in the years when I wasn't in the classroom teaching, I stayed involved in a lot of different ways.
That's interesting, and I've been to that school in Sacramento. Christian Brothers, an amazing school, beautiful campus, and just some great work there. And then you've been at NCEA now for 2 years?
Yeah, I've been at NCEA for 2 years now, a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I was superintendent of schools in the Diocese of Sacramento. Was my most recent gig. So I spent 6 years in a superintendency, and that led to the NCEA gig.
Well, it's been a great 2 years. Nico and I do a lot of work with Catholic schools, and we've seen a real resurgence. At the other gig that I've got at Amerigo, many of our partner schools are at capacity. Schools that had 200 empty seats 5 years ago now have wait lists.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing that trend also at NCEA? You've probably got more data than I've got, more anecdotes, but what are you seeing from a resurgence standpoint?
We are. It's a very interesting time too. We took an enrollment hit as a system going into the pandemic, but have recovered really strongly since. And there's a couple of things that are operating in Catholic schools' favor right now. One is that we've seen just an increase in positive perception of Catholic schools and the quality of Catholic education, especially vis-a-vis some of our friends in districts that were closed during the pandemic. People were looking for in-person options for their kids. And so we saw a big uptick because most of our Catholic schools were open during the pandemic. As the first schools in their jurisdiction, the earliest date we could reopen, they did. But what's really positive in that is the retention rates have been very high. So we have the families that came to Catholic schools during the pandemic. We've seen retention rates way over 90% and as high as 98% in some dioceses with all these new families. So, they came because we were open, but then they discovered the quality of the programs. Most importantly, they fell in love with the communities, and they've made the decision to remain in the Catholic school community.
So great time to be at NCEA, and tell us, you've been there 2 years now. For our listeners that don't know what NCEA is, maybe first start with what NCEA is, and then what are you excited about? What gets you, for this new school year? What are you jazzed about when you get up in the mornings?
Oh, that's a great question. So NCEA is the trade association for Catholic schools in the U.S. We were incorporated in 1904 as the Association for All Schools. So we're not part of the USCCB, though we work hand in glove with USCCB. So the USCCB is the Bishops Association, and we're the Schools Association. So we represent 5,950 schools, plus minus, with over 150,000 employees and 1.7 million kids. School, if you're a Catholic school, you're by default considered a member of the association, and all of the staff and teachers along with it. So we have a few main things we do as a trade association to support our schools. We are the keepers of the census, so we keep that annual and produce that annual data report on the state of Catholic schools. We do other research as well that's really focused on applied research, things that are useful for our members. We support the schools with public policy. So we have a public policy team that, under the leadership of Sister Dale McDonald, that works with our advocates on the Hill and making sure that we're taking full advantage of federal programs and avoiding the tripwires and pitfalls of legislation as it comes up. And then we do professional learning. So we have a lot of online resources, and we do a couple of really big in-person events every year, one for superintendents, and then an annual convention every Easter week for Catholic school teachers and principals.
And what are you excited about this year?
This year, what I'm excited about is we have just launched, or in the process of launching, a new content map. So we've taken all of the lessons of COVID and done a lot of listening with our members. And we're coming together in October with all of the superintendents, and we're going to be rolling out a focus on a few really important themes for our members that I think are the essential ones for Catholic schools. It was a really unpredictable time during COVID, but we responded really well as a system. And so we've got the wind in our sails to some extent. I know we're going to talk about school choice later. And although at the federal level, there's not a lot going on right now, there's a lot of action at the state level. And we see, I see some themes emerging as the essential ones for us to face. So, I'm just really excited about working with school leaders in schools to really tackle those big picture items and stay focused on those.
Yeah, it's I've been in this business 30 years, and the excitement, the resurgence, the enrollment, I haven't seen anything like it in 30 years. And what I sense and what I hear is it's quality, it's community, it's we were talking earlier about embracing students with special needs.
Mm-hmm.
An article today is August 30 or September 1st, and so if anyone's looking, the Wall Street Journal had a great op-ed about some Catholic schools embracing students with special needs, which is new. Can you speak to that, Lincoln? That historically Catholic schools have not served students with special needs. They've had to go to a public school with all the bells and whistles. But what are you seeing with Catholic schools and students with special needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see a real investment in a lot of places, and then just an acknowledgement of the need for investment, more or less universally now. I think that there was a perception that 30 years ago, maybe with some justification, a family who had a student that had special needs might go to their parochial school and be told, we just don't have the resources to support your student here. Mm-hmm. Which I can say, speaking from personal experience, is a very heartbreaking answer to receive as a parent. I think that there's two really important things going on. One is there is a culture shift in our schools. I think that this generation of educators really sees the need to take accommodation from the community perspective and make sure that we do have a place for more and more students. I saw this at the places like Milwaukee, Oregon 15 years ago when the LaSallian High School in Milwaukee, mm-hmm. Oregon put in a program that was really innovative at the time. High schools all over the country are popping up with programs like this now, and it's almost more the question of why we wouldn't have it than whether we will. And here in the Diocese of Arlington, the diocesan high schools have 3 tiers of intervention for high school students at all levels. From students with more significant learning differences like Down syndrome to kids that just need extra help with learning support and everything in between. So, and that's the second piece. Is I think that there's a real buy-in to the notion of making sure that these programs are supported financially. It has to get funded. We can't just want to do it. And schools are not just acknowledging that it needs to happen, but they're also making huge investments to bring on new teachers, new leadership, new curricula to make sure that the kids have the support that they need.
And you said firsthand you have a child with special needs?
Yeah. So my oldest son is very proud of him. He was diagnosed with Asperger's. In the high school I went to would not have been able to support him at the time, but I would say that living here in Arlington, that looking at what we've got here in this diocese, these high schools would absolutely be able to accommodate his needs now. So like even in the last decade, there's been tremendous progress. And, so obviously, my wife and I have been very invested in figuring out how to pay it forward for the next generation of students. And, we see it coming together way faster than we had imagined was possible. I know it's not the next generation of students. It's the younger siblings of kids that just a few years ago maybe couldn't receive the support they needed that can now be supported in their local Catholic school.
It's amazing. And you're right, the speed at which it went and some great work out of our Catholic universities, Loyola, for example, the Mustard Seeds project that Mike Boyle was involved with, but really the rapid acknowledgement and embracing has been wonderful to see. My daughter this summer spent the summer as a counselor at an autism camp in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of they have never said no to a child. And it was challenging, but it was a life-changing experience for her. And these experiences these young people are having today that, 30 years ago, you would not have heard of a camp like that. So, Nico, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, of course. So there's been a number of states in the past few years, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, that have been passing school choice legislation. So can you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that? Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's an interesting topic, and first of all, just step back and talk about what the Catholic Church feels about school choice. I mean, so we are members of a church that is, globally speaking, pro school choice on the behalf of families. So the Catholic Church teaches that a parent as the primary educator should have access to the best education they feel is available for their child, and have state support in doing that. So the United States is kind of set up differently with education than most of our um, than other countries around the world. In Europe, for example, you've got very different systems. They've never really moved away from what my friend Ashley Berner calls plural systems of education. So you might have in the Netherlands, for example, you might have the local district school next to a Jewish school, next to a Protestant school, next to a Catholic school, next to a non-sectarian school. And the parents have always been able to select the education that they thought was best for their kid. Of course, understanding that there were certain accreditation or standards that have to go with that. So the U.S. was a little bit later to this party. Partly that's was born out of pushback on Catholic education 150 years ago. I don't think we have time to tell that whole story, but it's a fascinating one.
Well, and actually, Lincoln, I mean, we had Catholic public schools 150 years ago.
We did, and there was just a real consensus, starting with as the number of Catholics grew in the U.S. in the 19th century. There was kind of a Protestant reaction to that, and at the time, most of the common schools, i.e., the local public school, was essentially a non-denominational Protestant school, and Catholicism clashed with that, and so Catholic students found themselves excluded. We ended up with this huge network of Catholic schools in the U.S. specifically because we felt our kids were being discriminated against. Right, so it's a fascinating story. I mean, NCEA has books on this; others have published as well. If you don't know the story, look it up. So, school choice for us really just is trying to honor parents and honor that the church teaching is, the church really wants parents to, as the primary educators, to be able to select the best school for their kids. Of course, for us as the Catholic School Network, we hope that parents would make the choice to send their children to a Catholic school when they have those dollars.
Yeah, no, it's been again, with the resurgence of Catholic education, we've also seen a massive surge in school choice legislation, and not just for low income students, which historically has been the movement. We're seeing universal choice now in states like Indiana, Florida, Arizona, where 99% of families are now getting vouchers or tax credits, which is new. I mean, that's very new to the movement, and I do wonder if funds like the Drexel Fund that have been helping to expand quality schools using vouchers, that if you're in Minnesota and you hear about these schools in Milwaukee that you would like in Minnesota, it's real simple. You got to pass a voucher because you can't have these schools without the voucher. So the supply side seems to be helping with the legislation, I think.
It does. And I mean, over 30 states now have some form of choice program, and some are big and some are small. Like the one in Florida is huge and has just continued to grow. There's different ways that they get set up. So in the early days, some of them were vouchers, but now there's things like tax credits or educational savings accounts. So, it's depending on what state you're living in. Google it. It might be set up one of several ways, but they all have the same intent, which is empowering parents to have more choices for their student. Education is very expensive, and the preferential option for the poor is really important for us as the church. So a lot of the early programs were means tested, but as you said, Rob, a lot of them aren't anymore. It's just a universal benefit, and as church, we're fine with that too. Again, it just supports the idea of parents having the choice that they should to pick the best school for their kids.
Sort of in this vein, Nico and I last year had Governor Bush, on the podcast, and he talked about a new movement in alignment with school choice, and he referred to it as class choice. Are you familiar with this movement that he was referencing?
Tell me more about what he was speaking.
What he was saying is that not only do they want that parents should have the right to choose their school, but they should have more ownership in choosing the students' classes. So that, in a traditional Catholic school, your classes are set. You're taking, freshman this, freshman that, and you don't have a lot of choice. He was talking about a movement. He's a big proponent of online education. So we obviously are fans of Governor Bush here at Catholic Virtual. But he was saying that with technology today, with online courses, families, if you've got two students at Bishop Ireton in Virginia that want Mandarin, they should offer Mandarin. So that's what he was pushing, for families to have a wider selection of courses, especially as you get into your older years. But also, sometimes in our Catholic elementary schools, kids blow through the math curriculum, and they should have access to, freshman algebra in eighth grade if they have blown through the curriculum. So that was his premise.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. And full disclosure, my last teaching gig in the classroom was in 2015, and I was the last German teacher at Christian Brothers High School, Sacramento, California. So we, the enrollment had declined, and we ended up closing down a program that had been around for decades, in favor of Mandarin Chinese, actually. So, and I'm sure, Nico, you've seen this too in the schools you work with, that things come and go, and there might be an uptick in interest in one area. So yeah, we put German bed in Sacramento, but it doesn't mean there wasn't interest in the district of 23 schools the brothers had for German. So, I just, kudos for you to trying to help problem solve that, because, maybe there's not, like you said, not enough demand in one site for that program, but across 23 schools, is there enough for a German class or even class 5? I'm guessing there probably is.
Well, and, today 50% of university courses are either online or blended. And so I would argue that if you aren't offering some sort of online courses, you're not college prep anymore. And this is, another way to offer the online courses is to offer more courses for families to choose. You're right. I'm sure in every high school, every Catholic high school in America, there are a couple families that would love German. But you're right. You can't run a German program. You can't have a German teacher for 2 kids. It just doesn't work that way. Or other things, like around AI, courses in AI. That's, again, 2-3 kids want it. You can now, and I think this is where Governor Bush was saying you should be offering a wider selection to attract and retain students in this competitive market that we're in.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that as well, like you were saying, with new technology and new courses like AI, and even some engineering courses, or even computer classes where kids are learning how to build games and code and things like that. Giving kids the option in Catholic schools just to add that course into their, into the curriculum, I think is awesome. So I think the school choice is an interesting topic to get into.
Yeah, and another phenomenon we're watching really closely is the evolution of the kinds of schools, by the way. So I'm sure you've discussed this with other guests, that post World War II, Catholics went mainstream by entering into this college prep movement that really dominates our high schools in Catholic education. We're very proud of that. Obviously, for Irish Catholics and Italian and Polish Catholics of their generation, coming out of the war, college prep was the fast track to the middle class that generation of families accessed very successfully. But I look at the program that my oldest son is in. He's doing cloud computing at junior college, and I asked the counselor, like, well, and he's doing very well with the curriculum. And I asked, well, what's the biggest challenge for kids in this program? And that's, well, finishing it, because they get job offers before they're done. There's a tremendous demand for new kinds of jobs that demand different kinds of college or tertiary level preparation than what we would have seen in 1970. And so, that's a really interesting for us too. We have friends in Galveston, Houston, and other dioceses that are looking at, one could call them trade schools, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. These are high-paying, high-tech, stable middle-class jobs that might be something a little bit different with the curriculum than traditional college prep, at least the way we've been doing it. So, for us as the association, we're, the church is really a grassroots church, and we're trying to pay close attention to what our members are doing with innovation like that too.
That's great. And kind of leading into this is what are your thoughts on micro schools, whether in Catholic institutions or just in general?
That's a great question. I mean, first of all, I'm a big fan. Sacramento was a rural, or is a rural diocese, not just an urban one. So it's 42,000 square miles. And so when I was superintendent there, we had most of our schools in 4 counties, and that left another 16 across this huge expanse of Northern California. And so, micro schools could take a couple of different forms. We have a school as small as Our Lady of Lourdes School in Colusa, California, that has 60 schools. And when I came to the association, I learned that's really not unique. There's about a quarter of membership. So about a quarter of our Catholic schools, as of 2 years ago, had an enrollment of 150 kids or less. So they qualify as a micro school depending on how you wanted to define it. So things like multi-age instruction or multi-grade instruction, combined classes. There's a lot of good traditional practice in Catholic schools across the country. I will say that back to virtual schools and virtual innovation with Sacramento. Rob, just speaking to this, that the idea that you might have 3 or 4 families in a parish in Alturas, California, 6 hours from the pastoral center, and and far away from any population center. I mean, the idea of really micro schools of kids coming together at like a parish center, but accessing an authentically Catholic education through blended learning. We think that's a really exciting opportunity too for rural families.
No, it is, and you're right. There are a lot of dioceses that have a city center, but then serve so many places that don't have a high school. So Madison, Wisconsin, similar to Sacramento, capital of the state, big state university, they have one Catholic high school in the entire diocese of Madison. They now have 2. They've got an online high school that is serving about 15 or 20 students out in the rural areas that don't have access to Edgewood High School in downtown Madison. So it is, you guys, Sacramento, are certainly the leader in that, the first one, but there are now 5 of these out there that are serving sort of rural Catholic families that want a Catholic high school. They often have the elementary, because you're right, it's 100 kids, 150 kids, but it's hard to do a high school at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nico, I just wanted to add on to that, your initial question. I think one point of concern for us for micro schools is, nationally, this is a movement. There's not a lot of colleges that specialize in multi-age instruction or pedagogy for teachers and teacher preparation. So like if I had one thing on my wish list to support all that, it would be more teacher preparation available, through colleges or online or elsewhere for teaching multi-grade classrooms. It's the University of Nevada at Reno, for example, was one of the few on the West Coast that I found that as of a few years ago still had really good preparation in how to teach in a one-room schoolhouse, which in rural Nevada is a thing, right? And there's you can get a really good education in a one-room schoolhouse. But the teacher has to have a different set of tools or skills than a person that's teaching 30 kids in one grade with synchronous instruction. So the one thing on my wish list would be a little bit more support in higher ed. And looking at this question, how do we prepare teachers to be really good micro school teachers?
That's really interesting. I'd never thought about that, Lincoln. That's fascinating. And we had Father Dennis, your colleague at the ACCU, representing the Association of American Colleges, Catholic Colleges and Universities. And we asked him what the greatest threat to the Catholic university is, and it was fascinating. I was not expecting this, but he said it's Google U, which gets to your point about the program your oldest son is in. Many corporations now have post-secondary courses. So if you go to Google U and you take, I forget what he said, 2 or 3 courses and you pass, you're guaranteed a job at Google.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a little threatening to Marquette University or to Santa Clara University. That and he was naming others like Goldman Sachs, and not just the tech companies. And a lot of companies are not happy with the products they're getting out of our universities. So they're offering courses that train young people to be in their employment, which is an interesting answer from Father Dennis. The biggest threat to Catholic universities is Google U.
And Lincoln, you mentioned a couple of events that are coming up this year. I know you mentioned one in October, and then you also said you do an annual convention. I know I've seen on the NCEA site that there's one coming up next year, I believe. I think you said around Easter time. So can you just explain a little bit more on that, just to refresh the people?
Exactly. Yeah, happy to talk about it. So we have we have two major events every year. Our October event, which is going to be from the 22nd to the 25th of October in Raleigh, North Carolina, is called the Catholic Leadership Summit. And so that's where we gather superintendents and associate superintendents and network leaders and higher ed leaders to come together for 3 days around leadership level questions. Are the two topics we're tackling this year? There are Latino and Hispanic engagement and enrollment, and we'll have our friends from Notre Dame and Boston College and LMU leading that conversation. And then we're also looking at hiring for mission and recruitment practices. So where do we find that next generation of mission-centered educators and leaders? So those are the two big topics there. And then, this coming Easter week, so April of 2024. We're going to have our annual convention in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so that's a 4-day gathering of teachers, of principals in the school, really school and instructional and ministry focused. So we'll, in the past, we've drawn as many as 10 to 15,000. Coming back from COVID, we went from 2,000 to 4,000 we're fully expecting to surpass that in Pittsburgh this year. So it'll be a big citywide convention of Catholic educators coming together.
In Raleigh, there's a great school with a great story that I hope you guys will highlight, Cardinal Gibbons. In 1999, it was down to 200 students, and the bishop called in an order of nuns and the Christian Brothers, and they jump-started it. It is now over capacity at 1,600 students. Wow. 300 over capacity, literally. Some great buildings, and one of the great things is they moved the campus ministry center from sort of back near the administrative offices right up front. So every student that walks into that school, faith, service, leadership, huge letters in the campus ministries right in the front of the school. So I hope you can include Cardinal Gibbons somehow in your CLS convention in Raleigh.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Lincoln, I want to respect your time. You've got a big job at leading all these Catholic schools across the country. So thank you for coming on the next class. And we close out every conversation we have here with one final question, which is, who was your greatest teacher and why?
That's a great question. The teacher that made the biggest impact on me is, and I would say my mother, but she never actually taught me in a classroom, though she was a teacher. From high school, definitely Earl Desmond. He was a social studies teacher at Christian Brothers High School, Sacramento. And the reason he made such an impact is when I was graduating, he said, you're probably going to go into business and make a lot of money, but if you taught, you could really make a difference. And so every time I had that invitation to come into education, that little voice stuck in my head, and it was his. So, just very, like I said, I think that was a vocational moment for me, and I'll always be grateful to him for that.
That's great. Well, Lincoln, thank you for joining us on the next class. Nico, thank you for helping us here, joining us, and for producing all of these podcasts. We hope that you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please rate us, give us a thumbs up or a 5-star, share it with your friends. We're sort of new, even though our 4th season, still relatively new here. And thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great day and hope to see you again at the next class.